I've been looking forward to this for a long, long time. It's a great pleasure, and we'll let him really introduce himself as we talk during the prologue. The author of Psycho Beach Party, who will also be with us this evening. I know some of you were asking, tonight at 7:30 in Centennial Hall, which is up on main campus, is where NT Live is screened. We're going to do a screening of his Die, Mimmie Die, and Charles Busch will join us for that and talk about a little bit about that film at the conclusion of the screening. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce my friend, the author of Psycho Beach Party, Charles Busch. Welcome.
God, I feel like we're on Fire Island. My God. Anyway, here we are.
Thank you for coming, Charles.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. I have so many questions to ask you. We're going to do like typical format. I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. And so
is this on?
This is on. See, you do have beach seating here. If you want to fill in the beach seating, you're welcome to at any time. Could we actually turn off the ocean? Yeah, that would be great. It's going to drive me crazy eventually. So welcome. I want to ask you just a few questions to get us started. And the question, when I've said that you're coming, and you're also doing your cabaret on Monday and Tuesday.
There's an overkill of Charles Busch here. My God. I've had enough of him already.
No, he's really good, trust me. Okay. Tell us a little bit about what it is you do. We were talking about this last night. Did we call it a drag act? What is it? What is your cabaret? What is it that you're going to be showing us on Monday and Tuesday?
It's a weird act. I don't really understand it myself, except it seems to be going over. It's kind of weird. Well, this is the thing, I really, for decades now, I've been doing, always being in plays, and I'm always playing the character, different character in each play. And most of the time it's been the female character. And what I'm just really loving doing this cabaret act now is that in a certain sense it's very much me, and it's kind of like being in my living room, and I sing songs to it and do different characters and tell stories that are about 90% true, and which is I guess the best any of us can do, isn't it? So and it's a little weird because they introduce here's Charles Busch, and then I come out looking very glamorous, and but it's rather easy for me. I don't know why. It's just something in me that I can be almost more myself in disguise than out of it. I don't know it, but it seems to work. I'm not changing it.
How long have you been doing this?
The act?
The act, but also performing as the grand women of Hollywood.
Boy, oh boy. Well,
is that a bad question?
No, it's not, but about close to 40 years. Yeah, no. Well, how could he? He only looks 40 years old. That's not possible. It's not possible at all. He's lying.
So how did you get started in this? What makes a young actor say, I'd like to do women roles?
Yeah. Okay, well, I can be kind of flip and glib at the same time. I'd rather not. I have kind of a somewhat androgynous nature, and I just, I was raised in a kind of matriarchal family, very fascinating, intelligent, stylish women, and grew up very sympathetic to all the things they were going through. At the same time, growing up watching on television classic Hollywood films, from the 30s and 40s and 50s, and sometimes I think maybe somehow identifying the women in my family with those actresses, so it became rather a profound identification, and I just always could I have a talent for mimicry, so I just always could kind of imitate people's voices, and but the dream for me really was to be an actor. And I grew up in New York City, and I was very fortunate that I was actually raised by my mother died when I was 7, and I was really adopted by my mother's older sister, my aunt. It was very much like the plot of Auntie Mame. Those of you know that movie, and she was a remarkable woman. So anyway, so she took me to all the Broadway shows since I was 7 years old. So I just wanted to be an actor. And then I always wrote, but it was really the acting was the dream. And then I went to Northwestern University. And I was a theater major, and I just saw that I just was never cast in a play, And now this is 1972, 73, and there just really weren't roles I would be right for. And so I was never cast, but I have a kind of pragmatic nature, and after I'd be terribly disappointed, I'd think, well, I'd probably cast that guy too. He's more right for it. But then where does that leave me? And it did seem to me that a university theater is a bit of a microcosm of show business in general. And I thought if I'm having trouble being cast in university theater, I may have a hard time of it professionally. What do I do? Because all I wanted to do was be on stage. Well, fortunately, when I would go home on vacations back to New York City, I started seeing more experimental theater. And the early 70s, mid-70s was kind of a golden age in New York of experimental theater, and there were just extraordinary people, writer, performer, directors who had their own companies, Richard Foreman, and the Performance Group, and above all, this gentleman, Charles Ludlam, who was a brilliant playwright, actor, director, and had his own company with a crazy name called the Ridiculous Theatrical Company. And they just were outrageous and free and kind of decadent and outrageously funny. And when I first saw him perform, it just changed my life. I suddenly saw all the possibilities ahead of me, that there were no limitations, that if I'm not right for the roles in the current repertoire, I can write parts for myself, Ludlam, there was a great quote that I read that he once said that, about himself, that when he couldn't get past those doors, he built a new door and walked through it. And so that really was the inspiration for me, that I could just create my own universe and do it.
And so Ludlam was a major influence on you. Can you talk a
little
bit?
And I didn't really answer your question in a certain sense about the drag, but anyway, in Ludlam, his company, they did all sorts of things that I shared an aesthetic with an interest in 19th century theater and old movies and melodrama plots, and then some of the actors sometimes were playing female characters in a really outrageous way, and I thought, well, I have a kind of a knack for that. That's kind of in me, and maybe that's something I could do on stage. So that's it.
So did you work with Ludlam at all, or not so much?
Ish. As he really was an idol of mine, and I got to know him, but I never. The dream was never to work with him. I just wanted him to think I was talented, basically, And so I kind of stalked him, but not to work with. Just I wanted him to think I was talented. That's all I wanted from him, And I don't know if I ever quite achieved it, but anyway. Briefly, he gave me a big break, actually. I started out as a solo performer, and because it was sort of cheaper, easier to sort of book myself alone than try to put on a play where you needed some kind of money, I guess. So I was a solo performer, not in drag, just kind of dressed as I am, and playing all these different characters, male and female, to tell these different stories. And when I finally got Charles Ludlam to see me perform in this very tawdry little cabaret, he let me do my show as a midnight show on weekends at his theater, and because he had his theater, they were in permanent repertory, and that was a wonderful, wonderful break for me. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit. Let's sort of go into Psycho Beach Party a little bit. How many of you are seen Psycho Beach Party today? We won't give away too many of the secrets, but a few. Psycho Beach Party takes place in the 60s. It's a story about a girl named Chicklet, originated by Charles. I don't know if there's anything else you really need to know. There's a plot of someone keeps beating people up and shaving them from head to toe, and we have to figure out who it is, and that's kind of the plot. But more importantly,
it's kind of a mashup of two different movie genres. But both of which are pretty much forgotten today. It was kind of an homage to the beach party movies of the early '60s, Annette Funicello and Gidget. I don't know if anybody's seen that on TCM. And then also Hitchcock psychological thrillers like Marnie. But what I try to, I hope is that, the assumption, of course, particularly now, is that most people have never heard of any of those movies or seen any of those movies, and that the show can just stand up on its own. It's just a funny piece.
Why were you interested in presenting a bit of a spoof of the '60s style beach movie?
Oh, should I tell that story? Well, hello, darling. Come to join us. See, I gotta try to do this the most succinct way because I could go on forever on this story. But just after I was a solo performer for about 7 years or so, and I learned so much, and I booked myself all over the country doing this weird performance art act, and I learned so much, and I just kept kind of growing and learning, and I had a rather insane belief in myself. I just assumed that it was all going to work out, that I was going to be able to earn my living in the theater, and that was my dream. Was not to have my own sitcom or win an Oscar. It was just to earn my living doing what I love, and that's one of the great rare joys in the world, and so that's what I wanted, and it was very hard to make happen, and took me till I was about 31 before I absolutely could just earn my living as an actor-writer. So after I was a solo performer, I ended up getting a group of friends of mine together, and we started putting on plays in this very dicey kind of art gallery performance space bar in this very frightening neighborhood on the way lower East Side, but we started doing that. Suddenly, I didn't really intend to have a theater company, but we ended up all enjoying each other's company and just kept putting on these little plays, and one of them, which was called Vampire Lesbians of Sodom, just took off. In 1985, it just took off. We were just doing it for fun for a weekend or two, but it just we were in the right place at the right time, and so it took off, and we transferred it to a real theater off Broadway. Ran 5 years, and that was the big break, from the opening night of that play, I could earn my living in the theater. It was the most exciting night of my life, really. So anyway, to Psycho Beach Party was the next play we did, and when we were at the Limbo Lounge, this strange bar, I would do a curtain speech to get people to sign our mailing list. This was in the old days before the internet, where the only way you could let people know if you're doing so if they signed the list, and then we'd send our flyer. It was called a flyer. We'd send a flyer and this thing called a stamp we'd put on it, and you'd get it in the mail, and you could put it on your refrigerator door, it was an amazing thing. It's strange. We used to do that, and so anyway, but so to get people to sign the mailing list, because we had no other publicity at all. I would do kind of a curtain speech at the end of the play, and I would just sometimes invent the titles of plays just to lure people to sign the list. So just off the top of my head one night, I said, "Oh, you must sign our list because we're going to do all sorts of plays, including Gidget Goes Psychotic." And I got a nice response. So I just kept using it as the punchline with no intention of ever writing that play, because I had no interest at all in beach party movies or Gidget or anything like that. That's not my trip at all. So but I just kept using it as the punchline. And then when we moved the Vampire Lesbians off Broadway, I continued to do this curtain speech and say, Gidget Goes Psychotic. So a couple of years go by, and my director and producer, Ken Elliott, said, we ought to do a play called Gidget Goes Psychotic because we've been publicizing this for 3 years. And I said, "Oh, but I hate those movies. That's so boring, and I can't play, and I was always the star of the play. So I said, I don't want to play Gidget. That's so, I play sort of grand dames. I'm, Betty Davis. I'm Garbo. I'm not Gidget, nerdy teenage girl. That's not fun for me. My audience, the people who come to see our shows don't want to see me play that kind of part, But then we thought, I tried to figure out how could I do it, and Ken said, "So listen, if we're going to do it after we've been yakking about it for so long, it's got to be every aspect of Gidget, and beach parties and surfers and all that, and she's got to go psychotic in a big way, you know. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe if she was split personality, you know, then I could play other characters too, and not just be stuck with the Gidget, you know. So that's how it all comes about, you know. I mean, I'd like to say that, you know, that I had this great artistic, you know, revelation and theme and all that, you know. But what was so marvelous about having this little ensemble of actors, and we were together from '84 to '92. What was the great part was writing specific roles for all these people, and you know, we did about 8 different plays, and it was a real challenge because they were an eccentric group, you know, and each one was just eccentric is the best word, and you know, and everybody had what we called their trip, which was just kind of like, you know, oh, Teresa, she had a great scream. We ought to put her scream in every play at some point, you know, or she also was this kind of rather fragile, wispy, kind of breathy girl, but she also could, when called upon, could really get this real guttural, kind of tough as nails dame would come out of her. So every play I had to kind of allow her to do her trip, and Bobby Carey, who was just the most beautiful boy in the world, just so spectacularly beautiful, this incredible body, and he wasn't an actor at all, you know. He really had no aptitude for the stage at all, you know. But
he looked good,
and as sweet as I hardly can talk about him because he died so young, just the sweetest boy in the world. And anyway, so we had to figure out in every play to get his clothes off, so you know, because there had to be some reason he's in the play, you know. So in all these plays, he was either tortured, you know, those clothes ripped off him, or you know, there's always something going on. So you know, so each person had their trip, you know, and so it was interesting having to write for this group, and each play let them do their trip at the same time. You can't just write the same play over and over. You have to also, and you know, let the actor get bored, so you had to kind of twist it around a bit, so show them a slightly different light, but not. And some of them weren't really actors, you know, like Bobby, so you couldn't, you know, be too demanding. It was a bit of and then I had my own, you know, issues of things, how I saw myself. So it was a bit of a Chinese box trying to create, you know, a play that would suit everybody, and promises made, you know, that if you know, play this part, the next one you'll play this kind of part. You know, oh, it was hard. Don't blame me. So Psycho Beach Party really was, you know, constructed to fit this group and their odd talents, and you know. Yeah, so and when I was watching it last night, and I was just flooded with nostalgia, and seeing and watching the play and seeing all the choices that I made as a writer that really were made so pragmatically, just to suit the, you know, the whims and needs of this, you know, odd group.
We were watching it last night, of course, directing a show and then sitting in the audience next to the author and stars. Horrifying experience. Charles, no. Charles is lovely, but occasionally I looked over and you go, oh, what did I do? Like, no, I wrote that.
I know, really, because I hadn't read it, I hadn't seen it in many years, and hadn't read it in a long time either. And it's a rather early play of mine, and you know, there are things that, oh no. You know, what was I thinking?
Well, could you talk a little bit more about that? You said you haven't seen it actually in a while. It was made into a film in 2000, around 2000,
yeah,
is that
I
right?
think so.
And we were talking a little bit about this last night. There's some of the comedy in it has a very different effect in this day and age than it might have in 1987.
I guess so. You're more aware of that than I was.
Oh, okay.
Well, no. I thought you had a good point. It's just that it was, you know, I had so many things going on last night. You know, just seeing my past, you know, go before my eyes, and you know, it was a tough night.
I think it is interesting because there's it was a tough night. Oh,
and the cast is all there, and you all were marvelous, truly. But it was just it's you know, it was odd, you know, because you know, I really was. It was like I was watching the play, and then I was also kind of watching this movie in my head of the past, and seeing all these friends of mine, and you know, because it wasn't just a, you know, a kind of cold-hearted professional job. These were my family. Were my at the time my closest friends, and so it was a very, and in some cases some of them have died young, and the whole thing, it was just rather intense, sort of seeing it all.
Well, I guess the point we talked a little bit about last night is this isn't giving anything away. There's a love story in it of two surfer boys, which is, has a lot of humor, but it's also quite touching. And at the end, do you mind talking about it? At the end, there's a speech that one of them gives that's very much, we call it the Stonewall speech in the play, we're going to be accepted someday and blah, 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 blah. And you talked about having the challenge of that in 87, and now there's something completely different with the acceptance.
Well, I just thought it was kind of funny, and it never really worked very well in 1987 either. I thought it was kind of funny that suddenly in this, very zany beach party spoof, that these two surfer dudes who are kind of brainless throughout the whole play, can barely string a sentence together, suddenly, they not only, realize that they're madly in love, but one of them suddenly makes this very articulate speech about, gay rights, and I thought that was kind of funny. Never got a laugh, yeah. And I would have cut it, but poor Bobby, that would have been heartbreaking to do, You just couldn't cut his big speech, just couldn't do it, But it was not, even at the time, I was like, oh God, it's not. They don't think it's funny. And I remember some critic, kind of took me to task on it that the play is a funny thing, and suddenly, out of the blue, he gets preachy at us. I thought, I didn't want to be preachy. I thought it was funny, So anyway, I couldn't cut it because Bobby would have been upset.
Well, and now I think you see what you see today.
Yeah, but now it's
quite sweet.
But that was an interesting thing what you said, that today it's sort of nostalgic in a certain sense, hearing them talk about things that the world has changed so with gay rights, that since that play, and gay marriage and everything, that it seems rather sweet and antiquated. Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about the more modern history of Psycho Beach Party. How did it come about to become a film?
Well, it really was just, I have this manager who I've been with for over 30 years, who's a real character, Jeff Melnick, and he just loves me so much. And most people are always complaining about their agents and their managers who never return their phone calls. He loves me so much, and he's just a great guy, and he's always thinking about me, and nobody else can say that. But we joke because most of his ideas are terrible, but occasionally he comes up with a good one. And he was determined. He thought the Psycho Beach Party could be a movie, and I thought that was a terrible idea. I thought it's a theatrical piece. It's not, you can't make that into a movie, which are by nature more realistic, and a terrible notion. But he kept pursuing it for years, and then he'd occasionally say, "Oh, so and so turned us down." I said, "Of course." And then it just sort of happened about 8 years later that there was this fellow Bob King, a young filmmaker who had shot a very well received short subject film that was released by a company called Strand as part of like a omnibus of 3 short films. And Strand wanted to get into producing their own movies as well as distributing them. And they wanted to make a movie with Bob King, and it just so happened that Bob became a client of Melnick, my manager. So then he started thinking, that put it all together and get the movie made. And that's what happened. So it was all just kind of serendipitous, and really Jeff made it happen.
Talk to us a little bit about, if you would, the development, since I think many people will come to the film screening or have already seen it, the development of Die Mimmie Die, and where that came from. And you're very proud of that work, I know.
I really love that movie. The movie Psycho Beach Party, I don't know. I'm thrilled that it has its cult following and everything, but
well, you're going to have to explain that.
I have a little problems with that. But anyway, but the movie Die Mimmie Die, I really was very proud of, and I hope you'll come see it tonight. It's my Lear, and one of the greatest performances really ever committed to film, I think. So anyway, it was thrilling. Well, I must sound completely different from all the other playwrights you've had who come up with a more profound idea of writing a play. I'm a craftsman. I'm a playmaker, and I've had a very unique career that I have no plays in the trunk waiting to be done. I just, whatever I've written, we've just done it because we've either did it ourselves, made it happen, or in the latter years been commissioned by a theater. I really haven't had to seek out to try to get a play done. I've been extraordinarily fortunate, and most, 7/8 of the plays I've written I starred in, and so they were written as vehicles for me to give me opportunities to act, really. So there wasn't, it wasn't because I thought of some theme that I needed to explore, and I have certain limitations as a performer and things I know I'm good at, things I know I'm not good at, and I write so many of those plays for that. So, Die, Mimmie Die, I guess this was around 98 or something. My friend Ken, who had directed and produced all my early plays, who I had my company with, had moved to L.A., and he was trying to get into TV directing. And so he thought maybe a way of getting himself some publicity would be if I came out there and we did a play in L.A. And just so happened that I was going to be in L.A. making the movie of Psycho Beach Party, and I had a very supporting role in that film, and I was only going to be working about 10 days, and so I was just going to be there. So I thought, well, sure, why not? And I wanted to write a play for us to do that that I could write quickly, that wouldn't be too much of a challenge, that we could kind of recycle, just very typical of the work we'd done with our company. So I was trying to think quickly of an idea, and I thought, well, maybe if I looked at classic literature, a myth or some famous story that I can then update. And so first I thought of Oedipus, because I thought I could play Jocasta, the mother, but make it all from her point of view, so I could be the star, but then more I worked on it, it's really Oedipus' story, no matter how you twist it, So forget that. The hell with Jocasta, And my friend Carl said, well, what about Clytemnestra? She's the star of her story. Yes, Clytemnestra. And then immediately, this is just the way my imagination works, immediately I thought, well, what if, since Clytemnestra kills her husband and has the young lover, I thought, well, maybe I could do that in the style of early or mid-'60s horror movie, sort of like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, or these movies that, for those of you young people, in the early 60s, there was this movie, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and these two legendary actresses of a certain age, Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, who hated each other, who both were kind of in decline, at this point in their careers, and somehow somebody thought the idea of teaming them up in this basically a horror suspense movie, and nobody wanted to produce it, and I think the head of Warner Brothers said, I wouldn't give you a dime for those two old broads. And somehow they got the financing and made this movie, and it became a huge surprise hit. Big blockbuster hit. And it started a whole trend that lasted through the end of the 60s, where basically every great movie actress over the age of 50 degraded herself in some horrible movie. And none of them were on the level of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Poor Joan Crawford just went down in the most tawdry vehicles, but allowed her to continue being a star, and that's what all these ladies wanted. So I did Die, Mimmie Die as an homage to what's been called Grand Dame Guignol. Yeah.
Before I would turn it over to you and just ask this final question, I want to explore a little bit more the style that we'll all see in Psycho Beach Party, which we generally are calling camp. But a student asked me the other day to actually define it, and I looked pretty dumb because I didn't really have a very good definition.
Many books have been written on the subject.
So how do you define camp?
I don't know. I know as I'm good at it. Well, it's so complicated, because there are different kinds. I've read, Susan Sontag wrote a very famous essay in the early '60s defining it, and some things are camp, like John Waters movies, or hula hoops, or Hawaiian shirts, or so. There's certain things are camp because they're so bad that they're good. Like certain movies, like a really bad Joan Crawford horror movie is camp because it's so bad that it's good, But then there's beyond that. Then there are other things where a camp sensibility, though, can be in a way where you take sort of the outrageous elements of pop culture and sort of celebrate them, and give it its own kind of modern twist, and that's kind of maybe more where I'm coming from. And then sometimes I wonder too, because when you get an audience, like particularly like a kind of a gay cult audience that just gets every reference and all that, and certain things get laughs, and and you try to analyze, what is it really that's funny, and I think sometimes it's even more profound that there's certain concepts that are campy, like certain dualities of a character, like the grande dame who's very elegant, but then when she drops it, she's really a tough dame from Albuquerque. That's camp. I don't really, I can't really get that intellectual about it, but I sense it. Yeah.
Well, and just the main character, Chicklet, played by a man, do you think that's an important thing, or do you think it can just as easily be played by a woman?
Well, I think it sometimes is played by a girl, and I'd rather a good actress play it than a bad guy in drag.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather have somebody who's really skilled. It's the most important thing. I'm always very careful when I've decided which roles in a play would be played by a man in drag, or sometimes occasionally I've had women playing male characters. I'm very careful about it, and I like to shake it up and make it not be the obvious. For instance, in Psycho Beach Party, there's the part of the mother is this very outrageous sort of Joan Crawford. Boy, she's coming up a lot today. This sort of dragon lady mother, and I wrote the part for my friend McGann, who was about 5'9". She was a little taller than I am, and had this very booming, dramatic voice, and she had great style and flair, McGann, and so she really evoked those actresses of that era. So I thought it was really interesting having her play the part, and I understand that when the play is done a lot around the country, it's usually a guy in drag, because it sort of seemed like the obvious thing. But I'm thrilled that you have such a wonderful actress playing this part, and she really nails it. And it's more interesting because you're a tall girl, right? And so there's a little bit just a little ambiguity going on there, but it's nice that she's I think it's more interesting. So so I'm always having fun with drag too. In my own performances, sometimes I try to see like how far can you go and still be in drag? We're going to just kill all sorts of laughs. But there's a moment in this play when Chicklet. Oh, I don't want to spoil that laugh. Don't spoil the laugh. That's a big laugh. No. Anyway, sometimes I've been almost naked on stage, but I'm still playing a woman, and the audience just has to kind of go with it. Or I've played a female character who in one scene is wearing a man's tuxedo, so I'm really not in drag at all. But because I say I'm playing a woman, the audience lose themselves in the story. Then I guess I'm in drag, So yeah.
I want to turn it over to you guys. I know there are questions that you probably have. Is it possible up there in the booth that we can get a little house light so I can see, and that would be great. And then I'll play Oprah Winfrey here and go past the mic. Are there any questions for Charles? Up there, yeah.
Yeah. I'll take Donahue.
As you had mentioned earlier, you said you were watching Psycho Beach Party, and there were parts that you were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I actually wrote that.
Yeah.
So how does some of your newer and most recent stuff compare to your older bits, such as Psycho Beach Party?
Well, I don't want to put down Psycho Beach Party, since some of you are going to be coming to see it.
And it's a great play.
Yeah. But I think it works quite well. I'm actually, and it's a lovely production you're going to see here. It's... I'd say my later work was a little tighter constructed, and I maybe was more careful to have like the last, what we call the button, the last line of a scene before the blackout to be sharper, or just there are things that you do learn over the course of 30 years, hopefully, So there's at the same time there's a looseness to this play that's really quite lovely, and I probably wouldn't be able to do it that way again. That was a young person's play. Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to just stay out here, Charles. I'm going to leave you alone on stage.
I like it.
Did your
I'm used to it.
did your aunt ever get to see you perform?
Well, it's sort of odd, to tell you the truth. You know, she couldn't have been more supportive in some ways. I mean, just anything, she got me as well as any other person can get anyone ever. And from the earliest childhood, she thought everything I did was fantastic. Any creative idea, and I draw, I write, I act. Everything I did, she thought was just fascinating, and she threw herself into. You know, so I can't say, if only I got more encouragement at all. But she still was a lady of a certain generation. And when we were doing Vampire Lesbians of Sodom, the first one, and I was going to be in drag, and she couldn't quite wrap her head around that one. How that said, she gave us $5,000 toward the show. She helped us get a bank account for the show. I mean, then sometimes I go. She wasn't a hoarder, but she just had a lot of stuff in her apartment. So when we did Theodora, she bitch of Byzantium, and the big prop was we needed a dagger. Went over to her. She had about 6 different letter openers. Did a Christmas play, and we need the maid in the play needed a Christmas apron. She had about 3 we could choose from. It was like a great prop house. But she just. Some people don't get it, and I'm ambivalent about this, but she never came to see any of the shows we did. And she said to me, she said that she could go, but there's no way that she could be objective and just sit there. She'd be so nervous. She was so connected to me. I mean, so connected that she said she'd be just the whole time looking around the audience, and were they approving? Were they, what was their reaction? She wouldn't be able to just sit back and enjoy it. And then she said, what if she didn't? And then, she didn't have much of a poker face, that if she was at all withholding, then there would be this shadow between the two of us. And so she thought it would be better that she support it, give you the money, and don't come. And I thought that was kind of marvelous in a certain sense. And yet there was a part of me that she's the person whose opinion meant the most, that I certainly would have loved her in the fantasy world of her coming and thinking it was, so great. So things you just have to accept. Yeah.
Playing the role of what actresses in what movies would be at the very top of your bucket list?
Let's say it again?
And why?
I've missed the first couple words.
The opportunity to play what role, the role of what actresses in what movies.
Well, you know what the thing is that I never do any really specific, like I'm going to do a spoof of Sunset Boulevard or something. What I've always done with all of my plays that are film genre things, I've also done plays like The Tale of the Allergist's Wife, which are just contemporary comedies. But in my film genre parodies, I kind of like taking a genre of movie and sort of taking sort of elements of all these different movies and creating my own story. And so consequently, when I play the role, let's say, like we did a play many years ago called The Lady in Question, and it was kind of I hate calling it a spoof because it's something a little negative about the word spoof. But we were celebrating, I don't know, it's a little pretentious, but anyway, the anti-Nazi war movies of the early 40s. And there were a lot of these movies made in the early days of the war, or even before we got into World War II, where Norma Shearer and these different very elegant stars would be playing very self-centered, selfish society ladies who then would somehow, change and get into the gung-ho spirit of the things, and they'd be, rescuing people from the Nazis. And I love those movies. And so when I played my character, Gertrude Garnet, the world's most glamorous international concert pianist, who'd been the former Gertie Garnett, I'm always, that's sort of just kind of campy. Anyway, I sort of evoked in that part, it was an original characterization, but there were just times when I would sort of seem like Norma Shearer or Susan Hayward or Betty Davis or Rosalind Russell. I would that's kind of what I do. Because I've got a good ear for it, I can kind of give you a little taste of it, and then I fade into somebody else. But then the hope is by the end of the evening that you've just felt that you've seen an original character, not just an impressionist doing, impersonations. And this gentleman here actually has a question here. And he's sitting in that terrible chair.
How did you come to name the character the Great Kanaka?
This is the thing. The play was originally Gidget Goes Psychotic. And that was the thing. And all the characters' names were the names from the movie. So it was the Great Kahuna, and Moondoggy and all those names. So we did the play first in this bar, and then we were going to, like Vampire Lesbians, we were going to transfer it to a regular equity theater. So we began to wonder, though, whether we were going to have a copyright problem with Columbia Pictures that did the Gidget movies. So we hired 2 different copyright lawyers to investigate it, and they gave us 2 completely different answers. And one of them said, "Oh, it's obviously a satire, and you're protected by the laws governing satire. Go ahead." The other guy said to me, "Well, is every character obviously satirized?" And that was a hard question to answer because you often need to have, sort of somebody playing kind of the straight man. And the thing, in a way, Moondoggy, the leading man, had to be pretty much as he is in the movie so that, Chiclet could be the clown, And so I couldn't really answer that question. I said, well, Kahuna and Moondoggy are pretty much as they are, and they're not broadly satirized. So we didn't know what to do, and then I tell you, I started looking at the play, and I thought it was better than I imagined. It seemed to me I thought it transcended being just literally a spoof of Gidget that even in 1985 nobody remembered or cared less about. But I thought it had something to say, and it was an interesting play. So then we thought, well, we'll give it a new title, and we'll change the names. So instead of Kahuna, I don't know. I guess I don't know where I came up with Kanaka, but maybe we certainly didn't have Google back then. It must have been, maybe it's a Hawaiian name? I don't know. And Moondoggy, I tried to think Moondoggy, moon, star, dog, cat. I just tried to get the same idea. The character Berdine was LaRue on the TV series, so I was trying to think of another kind of nerdy name. So,
What are you working on right now, and what are you looking forward to working on later?
Well, I'm really, really, really enjoying traveling around the country doing this cabaret act. It's been a wonderful experience for me to really connect in this kind of unguarded way with the audience, and I'm loving that. And we're going all over. In November, we're going to be doing our show in London and Paris, which I never thought would happen, and I'm so excited about it. So that's really cool, and I love making movies, and I'm determined to make a movie of a play I did a few years ago called The Divine Sister, and I think looks very. I'm working on the screenplay right now, and I think it's going to happen very soon. I think I'll get the financing pretty quickly. So that's what I'm doing. Oh my God!
I know, it's amazing, right?
As someone who attended Ludlum and Ellen Stewart and Performing Garage and all that period, that was a great period for me of originality and expression. When I go to New York now, I don't see that theater. Where do you think that theater is happening? Maybe if I go to the public theater, I get something.
Yeah.
But
I
where do you think that theater is happening now?
Can't really tell you. I mean, there's always. I just feel there are always young people doing something interesting. There's just always going to be a new generation of young artists who have new ideas and are rebelling and having a very difficult time breaking through, and they'll find some place to do it, And
Is it New York?
well, it might be Delaware. It's harder to find. The problem in New York City, of course, is always real estate that the artists have basically been pushed out of New York City. So there are other boroughs. There are a lot of things going on in Brooklyn. I'm just too old to know about. But I think they're happening.
Where the Limbo Lounge is
all
now
very
a
glamorous
different
now.
place, isn't it?
Yeah, no.
Charles, I was wondering, there's a lot of people that sort of judge certain art forms and call it legitimate or not legitimate, and I know that at some point you sort of were able to cross over and you actually played Anti-Mame in a production that was somewhat heralded, I remember reading about.
Yeah.
And I wondered, how does that feel different for you as a performer to like cross over from your own art form that maybe some people didn't accept into what was normally a traditional role in a pre-existing play and play it obviously as a man in drag, but playing it serious actor.
Yeah, I didn't really play it as a man in drag. Well, I mean, I couldn't have had my career if I 20 years before. No, I'm very fortunate that I came about it when I did. And maybe we wouldn't be able to have the career that I had if I was starting today in some ways. But it is interesting that I did kind of cross over as much as anyone sort of could, I think. I mean, there's a ceiling, I'll be honest with you. There's a bit of a ceiling to how far male actors specializing in drag roles can go. I'd say. And I think I've hit that ceiling, But on the other hand, I must say I loved playing Anti-Mame. It was something very personal to me, since obviously, as I said, it reflected my own childhood. And I was always just drawn to that story about this woman and her nephew. And I had a hard time at first. Well, first I did a number of one-night, big sort of all-star, one-night benefit stage readings of it for the Actors Fund, and they were extraordinary nights. Each one, one night we had Peggy Cass, who created the role of Agnes Gooch in the play and the movie, recreated her role with me, and that was incredible. And all sorts of great actors played all the supporting roles. And finally, the director of one of the readings said, "We just got to do a full production," and we did a little summer stock tour. But then we had trouble getting the rights to a lot of these estates. They're very tough about having a guy playing a part in drag, because rather rightfully they would assume, if they didn't know me, that it's going to be very broad and parodied and whatever. And so I had to. We were denied the rights from the Lawrence and Lee estates, because at a certain point too, when the living authors are dead, you're dealing with lawyers who never even knew the artists and just make a blank ruling. So, but fortunately, I knew the son of Patrick Dennis, who wrote the original novel, Anti-Mame, and he was helpful, and he got me in touch directly with the children and the widow of Lawrence and Lee, and I wrote them specific letters and explained who I was and what the approach would be, and so we got permission. But I've been a number of times denied the rights, and I and frustrating it is. I get it. With my play, The Tale of the Allergist's Wife is very different from Psycho Beach Party or Die Mimmie Die. Linda Lavin created the role on Broadway, and Valerie Harper did it on tour, and it's this very realistic kind of New York comedy about this middle-aged couple and what happens to them. And occasionally I've gotten word that some regional production that they want to have a guy in drag playing the old mother or one of the other female parts, and I've had to really be tough about it and threaten sort of cease and desist, because that's not the way the play should be. And I kind of resent the assumption that because I've written this kind of play, then that all my plays are the same style. That they're very different. So I've been on both sides of the equation. So I can't be too judgmental.
I have a question about drag as well. Do you keep up with contemporary drag styles, like for what you might see on like RuPaul's Drag Race, and like, would you even get through in terms of your style through the first round of elimination on a show like that?
I wouldn't even make it through the
You wouldn't even
audition
get on the
tape.
show?
Well, I do watch that show, which I really enjoy, and it certainly has given drag a kind of awareness, a pop culture awareness. The thing is, that with that show, by its very nature as it being a competition show, they have to really narrow what the approach is. I mean, so you can't, drag is can be anything you want it to be, and I mean it's a theatrical. It's on one hand a theatrical convention. You can, do any million different contexts for it, but to have a competition, they all have to lip sync. It tends to be sort of club queens, so, and even with it, there's a broad range even within them, but it is very specific, so, if I was when I was younger, I couldn't have gone on that show. I mean, I don't know, I'm the worst lip syncer in the world. There's actually in Die Mimmie Die, I actually am lip syncing a number it's a clip of the star that I'm playing, her old movie, and so I'm lip syncing to it, and I'm just slightly off, and some people have written online saying, "Oh, I just love how it's so funny how you're intentionally just slightly off the word." I'm just bad at it, It's a real talent. It's a real skill. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So where it's been a little weird for me with RuPaul's drag race, and it's just my own, pretension maybe. It's just that when I was starting out, and when I started doing this sort of thing in the 70s, really, in my day, the word drag queen was kind of a pejorative, and so the performers of my generation, we just hated that, to be called that, and we felt, because we were trying so hard to be taken seriously. I wanted to be reviewed in the New York Times. I wanted to, really be taken seriously for something that was, I think somebody used a good phrase here, and I can't remember, but just, that was seemingly uncommercial, and very downtown, and all these phrases that not mainstream, So, I wanted to be taken seriously, and so when people referred to me as a drag queen, I felt it was a bit of a way of marginalizing me and patronizing me, that I wasn't really a actor, writer, but that I was kind of a slightly freaky, marginal person who dressed up for my own sexual gratification, or dressed up just to be outrageous, or rebelling against, my mother or something, I don't know, whatever, just all these, or it's my lifestyle, all these things, and that was not what I identified with. I saw myself as a serious actor, writer, and so I just, it said everywhere, just would never say the word drag queen around Charles. Just don't say the word. Just never uses the word drag around Charles. And it got so silly, And finally, I was out doing a show somewhere, and somebody said, be careful about dragging that prop. I said, oh, don't say it, You gotta lighten up a little bit, Yeah. So anyway.
Thanks. I want to just say, because I'm coming back down on the beach here. We have to get ready for the beach party here that's going to open in a half an hour. And as is always the case, I wanted to say a few things and then thank Charles. As is always the case, if you would like to stay here, you can just keep off the stage because they're going to be setting it up for the show. But we will bring Sex on the Beach drinks here to the center stage, and you can come down and buy them if you would like. You can also go out in the lobby, and there are drinks there. Charles and I are going to go out in the lobby if you want to ask a few other questions or take pictures. We can do that. I want to just say that we've got, as you all know, we have a wonderful season of Prologue coming up. The next one will be on December 2nd, which is a Tuesday, I believe, at 7 o'clock, and that's the actor Brian Dennehy. So we'll announce that a little bit more as we get a little bit closer. But I want to just take the opportunity. It's been a great pleasure to have Charles here. I want to say, if you don't know already, tonight at 7:30, Centennial Hall, a screening of Die Mimmie Die. and Charles's Cabaret, which we're calling Hit the Lights, on tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday at 7:30. And there are a few tickets left for Monday and a few on Tuesday. If you want to buy tickets, you can certainly do that in the lobby after the prologue. So all that leaves is for me to say thank you so much, Charles Busch, for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming today.